Hello everyone, I'm Pokey Harris, the Executive Director for the North Carolina 911 Board. I want to welcome you to this very informative video series being offered to you through the Board's Learning Management System Virtual Academy. As a PSAP manager, telecommunicator, or support staff to the 911 operations, it is our goal that through these modules you will become even more familiar with NG911. This presentation, validating the implementation of NG911, 911's response to Hurricane Helene in North Carolina, is our story, and it's your story, of NG911 here in our state. We've been blessed to share this presentation literally across the country, from North Carolina to California to Hawaii, both in person and virtually. Now, we've not been to Hawaii in person, let me just say that. That's all been virtual. As we begin, I want to humbly share with you how proud we are of what has been accomplished in North Carolina in regard to 911 call service delivery. It's grounded in governance, authority, technology, operations, and relationships. But I want to share a quote with you from Pablo Picasso that has actually become our staff's mantra. Our goals can only be reached through a vehicle of a plan in which we must fervently believe and upon which we must vigorously act. There is no other route to success. Through our presentation, you will hear us speak to the vehicle and the route. However, it's at this point that I must share with you and make abundantly clear that we are in no way providing information to you in the typical manner that we all consider success or successful. There is no way anyone on our staff could stand before you and speak to the devastation, destruction, obliteration that Hurricane Helene caused in western North Carolina and other states close to us, and use the word success or successful. This is not celebratory in any manner. This is a validation of a system and critical infrastructure that functioned as designed and intended during one of the most horrific weather events experienced in North Carolina, and actually experienced in other states surrounding us. What we are sharing with you and what we are speaking about is validation. As we move through the presentation, various members of our staff, along with vendor partners, will share aspects of the implementation and deployment of your NG911 system here in North Carolina. Tom Rogers, who is our NG911 network engineer and program manager, Matt McLam, who is the state's GIS information officer, Josh Briggs, who is AT&T's assigned project manager for NG911 in North Carolina, and Stephanie Connor, who serves as the Western Region 911 Regional Coordinator. Also, I want to share a special thank you to Kristen Falco, who is the board's Education and Training Coordinator, who pulled all this together for us to have the series of videos for you to view. I'll begin with what we spoke about the vehicle, and for us, that vehicle is the governance and authority. Here in North Carolina, we have a 17-member 911 board established in legislation. It's a policy-making board with members appointed by the governor, the House, and the Senate. General Statute 143B, 1400 to 1406, let's get that right, so in case you want to reference it, speaks specifically to the North Carolina 911 Board. Membership, powers, and duties of the board are outlined. The 911 service charges discussed, including prepaid phones. The fund distribution to the PSAPs, grants, the NG911 program, providing 911 service to the citizens that even specifically speaks to the statewide EZNet, which now we know is a nationwide EZNet, the establishment of the state 24-hour NOC, or what you've come to know as the NMAC, and telecommunicator required 40-hour training in emergency medical dispatch. Just a little history, in 2016, there was House Bill 730 that established a special revenue fund for the implementation of NG911. It speaks directly to the minimum of 15% being set aside for this project. In 2017, the board executed its first contract with AT&T as a managed service contract to provide the EZNet core services and call handling equipment. This is very complementary to to the counties and to the processes for procurement for them because it is a direct bill to the 911 board. The PSAPs do not have to worry about procurement, purchase, upgrade, implementation, deployment, maintenance. That's all handled by the board. Also, and you heard me speak to relationships, we have a wonderful partnership with the state GIS office and also with the third-party vendor Geocom for our data hub and the GIS I3 compliance that you'll hear a little bit more about later. We have both an interagency agreement and managed service contract for this. In September of 2024, ironic, on the very same day that Hurricane Helene impacted the state, we executed the second contract with AT&T for another 7 years plus 3 years or 1 3-year renewals for our contract to continue these services. The caveat to this executed contract is that it's future think for 911 call service delivery. And what does that mean to you? As we begin to look at emerging technologies, we'll be able to move forward and to move ahead to be able to provide these to the PSAPs. And now, as we continue on with the presentation, I'd like to introduce Tom Rogers. Tom?
Thank you, Pokey. So, Pokey was talking about our successes in North Carolina. So there's a route to that success. It doesn't just happen overnight. So we utilize the Emergency Services Internet Protocol Network, which we call EZNet, which provides service to our 124 PSAPs, 113 primaries and 11 secondary PSAPs. We utilize alternate call routing, which is the automated transfer of 911 calls from one PSAP to another. If they're too busy to answer a call, there's no one logged in, other issues there that could be causing an interruption for that particular PSAP. We also utilize abandonment call routing, which is the manual rerouting, where Pokey mentioned our NMAC. Our NMAC can manually go in and adjust those calls to make sure they go to another PSAP without having to be interrupted by a ring timer or other delay. We focus heavily on our interoperability between PSAPs. We utilize our partners, and we work with those PSAPs to ensure that not only they receive 911 calls, but they can get those calls to another PSAP if needed. We have a heavy investment in our GIS. GIS is, you've heard Pokey mention a lot of the focus on GIS. GIS is where the call routing originates now. It's come a long way from where it used to be back in the day, so to speak. So at this time, I'd like to ask Matt McGlenn to come up and share some more about GIS across North Carolina.
Thanks, Tom. Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, data is, as you've heard, critical to the function of 911 call routing in a NextGen 911 environment. So with that said, let me first say thank you to all that have supplied GIS data for NextGen 911 in North Carolina across the state. Without your support and ongoing maintenance of this data, much of what we're looking at today and what occurred in 2024 and supported results after Helene hit Western North Carolina would be very difficult, if not impossible, in some scenarios. GIS data that supports NextGen 911 is made up of roads, addresses. It's made up of boundaries such as PSAP and provisioning boundaries, as well as your fire law and EMS boundaries. We ask that PSAPs upload this information at least monthly. That ensures we're getting the most up-to-date information available so that 911 calls are properly routed. We have a dashboard that you can see on the screen that tracks when PSAPs last uploaded their GIS data. Again, looking for that information monthly. If it goes beyond that, we know who to work with and who to coordinate with to ensure that that information is updated, and working closely with the 911 board regional coordinators, working closely with Geocom, and ensuring that that data is uploaded and it's also free of critical errors so that that data can be used reliably for call routing. So North Carolina has had a strong history in GIS. Local governments, state agencies in supporting the growth of GIS data and maintenance of that data. So again, we appreciate that partnership and what it has done for NextGen 911 call routing here in the state. With that said, I'm going to turn over to Josh and allow him to talk a little bit more about the EZNet here in North Carolina.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. Just a quick introduction to the technology and the architecture that's used here by the PSAPs of the AT&T nationwide ESINet that's utilized here in North Carolina. So just on the left side of the screen, as a call flow, if somebody calls 911, you'll see those three icons there. They represent our originating service providers. And those are our wireline, VoIP, and wireless carriers. As somebody calls 911, it then traverses into the middle where you see the AT&T ESINet, and there are 12 NextGen core services sites that are located in 6 AT&T data centers across the country. That's where the GIS data that Matt just described lies with our emergency call routing function, or ECRF, that routes the calls to the correct PSAP. The call then traverses the AT&T AVPN MPLS network, which is the nationwide network that is dedicated for the nationwide AT&T ESINet. It then traverses into the call handling data centers in Raleigh and Columbia, South Carolina. From there, depending on what call handling platform that you use, it then traverses the call handling network, which then traverses to the PSAP. Each PSAP, primary PSAP, has 2 redundant or diverse network connections in the addition to the FirstNet wireless tertiary connection in the event like we had during the hurricane, where both redundant or diverse connections were interrupted by the storm. And we have several PSAPs that have those enabled today, and some that are still connected using that sole connection. Just as a simplified view of what I just described, again, on the left you'll see the Raleigh and Columbia data centers where it hosts the call handling platforms, and then it traverses that AVPN network that is dedicated to the call handling and to the ESINet. And then from there, in the event that those connections get connected, we have FirstNet for that dedicated APN that allows the PSAP, whether it's a Viper or Vesta hosted PSAP, to connect and receive those calls. And for now, I'll turn it over to Stephanie to talk about planning and preparation.
Thank you, Josh. So, as a PSAP, you know that any incident takes planning. So prior to Hurricane Helene, the regional coordinators planned with all of the PSAPs to make sure that they were prepared for the storm. There were a lot of big words being used about this storm, catastrophic, words that they don't typically use. So as the Western Regional Coordinator, I worked with all of the PSAPs in the West that we thought were going to be impacted by the storm, and we made sure that they had friends. We coined that phrase. And friends are PSAPs who could help them to assist with taking calls should they have a service disruption or just be receiving more calls than they can take. So during this planning, I worked with the other regional coordinators, and we scheduled calls between PSAP partners for backup discussions. We planned backup methods for call processing and dispatching, and call routing paths were being built prior to Hurricane Helene. Not only prior to, but during this storm, when we saw that things were changing, and they were changing very quickly, we were able to build routes on the fly, if you will. The picture that you see before you is the welcome sign to Marshall, North Carolina, which is in Madison County. So September 27th, 2024, Hurricane Helene made landfall. And it was made landfall in North Carolina, should I say, and especially in the West. And it was as promised, a catastrophic storm. There was mass devastation, destruction, obliteration of resources in the state, loss of life. Every river, creek, any water source was flooded. There was change to the natural landscape as there were a multitude of landslides, which also came with their own challenges as people could not get away from those landslides. In the photo that you see, there is a red arrow. Under that red arrow is a building. This is Bakersville in Mitchell County, North Carolina. Under the arrow is a building, and that was the previous primary PSAP for Mitchell County. They now have a new PSAP that they moved into in 2016 as part of a grant. However, had they not been in their new PSAP, they would have been flooded out, underwater, unable to operate, and still to this day would have been unable to operate had their building been flooded. You'll see also in this picture, this is some of the landscape. And as you can see, there are railroad tracks. There's also the river. You see debris. And if you know anything about how fiber utility lines are laid, they tend to follow railroad tracks in the river. So you can imagine what kind of destruction was done when all of these flood waters were rising and ravaging all of these areas with all of the debris. So now I want to turn it back to Tom, and he's going to talk a little bit about the math after. Tom?
Thank you, Steph. So staff had opportunity to go out west and see some of the devastation firsthand. We were visiting some PSAPs and just checking on some of the telecommunicators around the state, and we were seeing some of what was going on. We were talking about all the statistics and numbers that we were seeing coming in, and it's turned into a conversation of the math after, because it was after the event, so it became math after. So that's where this term comes from. So across the state, during a time period, we received over 90,000 additional calls that we're not used to receiving. There was a 55% increase in 911 call volume that affected the statewide. So a significant increase in call volume just for this particular event. We had 17 of our PSAPs that were in full abandonment mode, which meant they had been disconnected. We manually rerouted those calls over to other PSAPs who could take those calls for them and then send them back for dispatch. We had 2 PSAPs that were policy routed to multiple partners. So they never lost connectivity. They were able to take their own calls, but their call volume was so astronomically high, they needed partners to be able to load balance those calls and help them take that increase so everyone that could call 911 could receive an answer and get help. We had 19 PSAPs routed to 23 others at the peak of the storm. This is a lot of activity going on, and if you think about that, it's a lot of exercise of the network. So we had one PSAP that was in full abandonment for a month. So if you can imagine going a full month with your phone not ringing if you're in a 911 center, and those of us who have worked in 911 centers know that scary silence. You don't want to hear the silence. So that's a long time to go with no calls coming in. We had SIP admin, which is utilized by most of our hosted PSAPs. That was used to complement 911 by routing those administrative calls to the also partnering PSAPs so they could help offload some of those administrative calls and help with some of that call volume as well. The services were restored in many, but there was a lot of temporary solutions in place. We had a lot of power outages, and there was a lot of line occurrences that were still going on as things were being moved and restored. You heard Stephanie talk about planning just a few moments ago. This is what we thought would happen, what you see on your screen now. We anticipated a few that we would have to abandonment route. We anticipated some of the alternate call routing that would occur. We planned for these. We ensured we had partners in place, but things don't always go quite as planned. This next screen you see shows the reality. We had, as we said before, at the peak of the storm, 19 PSAPs routing to 23 others. This is where the manipulation of the calls that Stephanie referenced earlier comes from. A lot of the on-the-fly changes that were occurring to ensure that calls were routed properly and ensure that if you dialed 911, if you were able to get service and call 911, you would get a call. You would get a telecommunicator on the other end of that call. So if you look at the numbers, you'll see some significant percentage increases near the bottom. The average increase on day of the storm was 586%. 586%. Think about that in terms of your own PSAP and what your numbers and your call volume looks like. Imagine what that would feel like. The peak PSAP we had was over 13,000%. That is not a misstatement. 13,000%. So if you're used to receiving 15, 20, 30 calls a day, imagine what that looks like. If you've got 2 or 3 people working and you're all of a sudden receiving thousands of calls. it is overwhelming. So there were some significant increases in call volume. As we've been talking about Hurricane Helene and our response and how our network in North Carolina works, we reference Buncombe County a lot. Buncombe County is a is a destination for a lot of tourism. It's well known among the nation. So we utilize this one a lot so folks will have a good point of reference. The day before the storm, Buncombe County had 443 911 calls. This is actually a little bit on the slow side for Buncombe County. They're typically a little bit higher than this. Day of the storm, they received over 5,000. This is over an 800% call volume increase. Reminder, a while ago I said some of the PSAPs had to do some load sharing, load balancing. Buncombe County was one of them. They never lost their primary service, but they did receive more calls than they could possibly take. So we had to utilize load balancing so others could be partners and help them share in that volume. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie, and she's going to talk about some of our key factors to success.
Thank you, Tom. We had a lot of key factors in our success during Helene. With the statewide EZNet, we have 124 PSAPs, or 191 physical locations that are connected to the EZNet. We have 64 that are hosted Vesta, 55 that are hosted Viper, 5 that are EZNet only, and all 110 GIS jurisdictions are compliant with I3 mapping data. And we have 122 PSAPs that utilize I3 for 911 call routing data. If someone could reach a carrier network, so if their cell phone was reaching their network or if their landline was reaching their network, that call was delivered. Maybe not to their PSAP where they live, but to one of the friend PSAPs that were helping to answer calls, even if it was hundreds of miles away. EZNet stability and integrity of the integrity and stability of the EZNet was absolutely crucial during Helene, and it stood the test of time. It was stable, all calls were delivered, all calls were answered. The planning of alternate and abandonment routes saved time in the heat of the moment. It also helped the PSAPs to plan for the future. Not only do they need these routes during a time of crisis, but they could need these on a blue sky day, as we say. We have planning for tertiary communication options for interoperability. We're working to help PSAPs to get call information back to the correct jurisdiction when the traditional means of communication are overtaxed or unavailable. The major thing that was a key factor in our success during Hurricane Helene were the PSAP's willingness to help each other. Not one PSAP manager said no. Even though their telecommunicators took some horrific calls, every PSAP was willing to stand up and help each other. So now this picture that you see, if you remember prior in my presentation, I showed the sign of Marshall, North Carolina. That is in Madison County. So Madison County, they, again, when I talked about resources and following the river or the railroad tracks, Madison County's central office for their local carrier was completely destroyed. And at that point in time, they were copper. So we knew that fiber was going to have to be replaced, which is going to take some time. So Tom and I spoke. We had a PSAP that was helping Madison County to answer their calls, Chatham County, and they had been answering those calls for 30 days. And we knew that this PSAP really wanted to get back to helping their own community. So Tom and I approached Pokey about the FirstNet option as a tertiary. We had been talking about FirstNet as a tertiary connection, and it was just being introduced at this point in time. So we asked Pokey, can we go ahead and implement this for Madison County? If it works, fantastic. We've got what we need for Madison. If not, then we know some things we need to work on. Pokey agreed, and on October 25th, 2024, Madison County was the first PSAP in North Carolina connected to the FirstNet tertiary connection. And they ran off of that connection for 370 some days. before they were reconnected back to fiber with their carrier. Again, they were the first PSAP to receive calls, and it was successful, and it was it did the job that we said that it would do. So it wasn't just a theory, it was proven. The Madison County was the last PSAP to be removed from their abandonment route, and the smiles on the faces of this picture you can tell they were happy. Though they had been through a tough time, there's nothing like being able to take care of your own people. And they were so happy when those phones started ringing again. They said that the phones not ringing was absolutely deafening when you really want to be able to help your people. In the bottom right-hand picture, you'll see a vehicle. This is called a SAC Colt. It was brought in to back up the FirstNet solution, just in case there were some connection issues, as when you have people coming in to pick up and clean up, sometimes some things could happen. So we just wanted to make sure that they did have a steady connection for FirstNet. This is a free offering to all primary and backup PSAPs in North Carolina, and as of today's date, all hosted primary and backup PSAPs are connected to the FirstNet tertiary connection.
Stephanie, I want to join you just a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
On this. And I've had to do this disclaimer every time we've had this presentation, in person or virtually. This is a wonderful quote. The more time you spend contemplating what you should have done, you lose valuable time planning what you can and will do. I think the example of the FirstNet redundant solution for Madison County is a primary example of this. We made a decision almost immediately to help one of our PSAPs. But when this quote was brought to me by Kristen to begin to include in our presentations, I had no idea who this Lil Wayne person was. I've now learned this is Lil Wayne. And now I've learned what Lil Wayne does for a living.
He's the best rapper in the world.
Well, I'm not going to get into that with anybody. But here's the thing. He may play music that I don't listen to, but that's some words of wisdom I think that we can all live by.
Absolutely. Agree. So moving forward, NextGen is NowGen in North Carolina. The 911 board has several focus areas. The first is 911 call delivery, redundancy, and resiliency. And that is something that the 911 board continues to explore and work toward to ensure that the calls will always be received at the 911 centers in North Carolina. The second is the PSAP commitment to identifying their friends. This is something that the regional coordinators worked with the PSAPs prior to Helene and especially after Helene to make sure they had at least 4 friends in line to help them to take calls during situations such as a natural disaster or on those blue sky days when they just need a little bit of help. And the PSAP Resiliency Compendium. The Resiliency Compendium is something that came out of Helene. It's technologies that we thought would be helpful for the PSAPs to help them function in everyday call delivery and answering and processing their calls. So this is something that will be coming forward in the very near future from the 911 board, but 3 focus areas that we continue to work on. Now I'm going to turn to Pokey for just some closing thoughts.
Thank you, Stephanie. I do want to say thank you to all of our staff and our partners for the presentation. As noted when we began, we were able to share this presentation to others across the country, but we wanted to bring it to the PSAPs. We wanted to bring it to the folks here in North Carolina, answering the calls for the citizens in North Carolina, so you could understand a little bit more about the system that you are part of. Here you'll see a hashtag, NG911, not theory, battle tested. This is a compilation of some conversation with 2 individuals, one being our legal counsel for the board, who during one of our conversations right after the hurricane and as calls were being delivered across the EZNet hundreds of miles away in abandonment route status or alternate status, it's no longer theory. It's not a theory. NG911 is not a theory in North Carolina. Then I had an opportunity to present across the country, literally with colleagues talking about NG911, being champions for NG911 for other states. And one of my colleagues turned to me one day and said, and in North Carolina, it's been battle tested. So we combined the two for our official hashtag, which is NG911, not theory, but battle tested. During this part of the presentation, this is generally where we take questions from the audience or whoever's in person or virtual, but we don't have that here today. But what we're going to say is, hey, if you have any questions about Next Generation 911, about the statewide EasyNet, about hosted call handling, about other offerings of the 911 board as we look at emerging technologies, please reach out to me, to your regional coordinator, to Kristen. We'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you. But again, today we want to say thank you very much, and we thank you especially for taking time out of what we know is your very busy schedule to view these series of videos. Thank you.